Hello, I'm Mama.
And I'm Annette, and welcome to Kitchen Garden Farmhouse. In today's video, Mama will be continuing to go through her life stories, and she's going to back it back up to her great-great-grandpa, Dr. John Perley Ford. We were thinking today about family reunions, and I know that during the past years, many years ago, we used to have family reunions on my daddy's side of the family. But as years have gone by, they pretty much have stopped many years ago. So family reunions is something that people used to do a lot back in the day. And it was nothing for grandchildren to gather around their grandparents and say, Grandpa, Grandma, what was it like when you were growing up? And so that's kind of where we're going to begin today with Dr. John Perley Ford in search for him and his life, which is in our family tree. So it took many people over many years to finally get all the information that they needed in search of Dr. John Perley Ford, which is Mama's great-great-grandpa and my great-great-great-grandpa. And Dr. John Perley Ford is a very interesting individual, and we're going to be unfolding some things about his life as we continue with these videos on Mama's life stories. But down through the years, there was many people that went through many things to try to find out about Dr. John Perley Ford. And they went through archives, library, even the Library of Congress, old cemeteries, photos, just you name it, they went through it, combing through it to try to find out the information they needed to get the truth about Dr. John Perley Ford.
John Perley
Wait a
Ford.
minute, Mama. Go ahead.
John Perley Ford was my great-great-grandpa.
And Dr. John Perley Ford was my great-great-great-grandpa.
And he was my great-great-great-great-grandpa. And he's my great-great-great-great-great-great-grandpa. And he's my great-great-great-great-great-grandpa.
Okay.
That's as drama as I can get.
The story that I'm about to tell you is going to have a lot of drama and tragedy in it, like General Sherman marching through Georgia and spared my great-great-grandpa's house, and he marched on to the sea, but he took everything that he had. It will be about people in the Civil War losing their lives through tragedy and starvation. In 1825 in Mississippi, my great-great-grandpa John Perley Ford married Susanna Catherine Gullman, and at that time she knew nothing about this northern family that he left. This video will be about In Search for Perley Ford. This story will begin by a letter that was written in 1918. This search begins with a letter from Sarah to Archie about my great-great-grandpa. Sarah and Archie were grandchildren of John Perley Ford. In the letter, it describes Perley as being 5 foot 6 inches tall and weighing 220 pounds. And it talks about he was in the War of 1812 in Lundy's Lane, Canada, and he was wounded in his leg with a piece of a spent shell, and it got well, but it never healed over the bone, and the rest of his life he wore a leather shield over that place. And the letter talks about John Perley Ford's grandfather came from Ireland to America and raised 11 sons, and he raised tobacco.
Also in the letter, it talks about how Perley's grandfather had died, and then Perley's father had moved to the Shenandoah Valley in Virginia, and there Perley was born along with his brother Joseph later, and then also later in life Joseph became the governor of Illinois.
Against his father's wishes, he married a girl next door. Her name was Cynthia Moore, and he was 17 and she was 22. And they married and had 5 children. And during the War of 1812, he joined the Army and went to the war, and he was wounded in his leg with a spent shell. And after the war, he did not go back to his wife up north. He went south. Also went to the school to learn to be a doctor.
So then after the war, Dr. John Perley Ford, he did not go back to his wife and 5 kids, but he went down to Mississippi, and there he started his 40-year medical practice. While there, he met a woman by the name of Susan Catherine Goldman, and they got married. At this time, Susan did not know about his wife in the north. This is what we hear. And so at that time, they lived there in Mississippi, but later moved to Alabama, and then they moved to Georgia in 1832.
After the War of 1812, John Perley Ford went to Philadelphia Medical School, and he passed at the head of his class to be a doctor.
So then, not going back to his wife and 5 kids in the north, he traveled down to the state of Mississippi, there to begin his 40-year medical practice. There he met a woman. She was a full-blooded Irish girl, and her name was Susan Catherine Goldman. They lived there for a while and then moved to Alabama, and then in 1932 they moved to the state of Georgia.
In 1847, he quit medical practice and started beginning to be a school teacher and taught school here and there. During the Civil War, several of Perley's sons went into the war and lost touch with the family.
Then in 1864, when the Union had gotten control of the railroad just north of where Perley lived, he convinced General Sherman that he was a Unionist even though he had 5 sons in the Confederate Army.
In the letter, he was told that if he traveled north, he would find his 5 sons if they were in a northern prison. So he moved to Indiana and wrote the War Department and found his sons were in the northern prison.
So while in Indiana, Dr. John Perley Ford had opened a school. What he did not know, that his first wife from the north and his 5 children had also moved to Indiana.
When he left them in Virginia during the War of 1812, one of Perley's sons from his second wife in the South, his name was John.
Perley's son John was in the Union prison and released in 1865. At that time, John had found out about his northern family by his dad's first wife in the north. The news spread. Shortly after this was discovered, his second wife from the south, Susan Catherine Goldman, died.
Then John wrote a letter to his brothers and sisters in the South and told them about their other family that lived in the north. In 1866, Perley moved back to Georgia to live with his son, George. Perley would not let anyone talk to him about his family in the north and or let anybody speak to him about them. A little later, he moved back to Alabama to live with his daughter, Sarah, until he died in 1869.
The story that was just told is information that came from the letter that came from Sarah to Archie back in 1812.
From here, the search will continue for Dr. John Perley Ford.
Please take a moment to subscribe if you have not done so already. Leaving a like, a comment, and sharing the video with others helps the channel to grow. As always, thank you, and I will see you in the next video.